Hello, everyone, and welcome to the WBA Canada podcast. I, of course, am Baden, and today I'm joined by the man, the Baggies Podcast, aka Louis Bench. How are you doing, Louis?
I'm very well, thank you, Baden. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing good. I'm doing very good. So today we're going to talk about some unpopular opinions. We sent out some social media stuff to all our different people all over the world, Canadians and English people just like you. And we've gotten some weird West Brom opinions, definitely. So we'll no need to stall it at all. We'll start with the very first opinion. And that is, we should have kept Kanu on. And I'll give you your chance to give your opinion on that.
Well, I think Kanu is an odd one for Albion fans because sometimes he's really good and sometimes he's absolutely terrible. There's no in between. It's one or the other. I think in terms of what we've got now, I think it would definitely be worth keeping him on. I think at the start of the transfer window, I'd have said, no, thank you. We're going to spend loads of money. We're going to buy loads of great strikers and we're going to have the best front line in the championship. But I think now we've got Zohore, who seems to be messing around and getting himself a game somehow. However, I do think that Kanu would be a useful asset in the side. I know I sound a bit stupid considering I'm fairly sure in one of my videos on my channel at the start of the transfer window, I said no thank you to Kanu. But I think, yeah, in terms of what we've bought, we've only bought Hugo in terms of an out-and-out striker. I think Kanu would definitely be worth it. He'd definitely put in more of a shift than Zohore. So, yeah, I'd say Kanu would be useful in this squad and I probably would take him back now. But only on a reduced contract, definitely with a reduced wages. I don't know what you think about that, Baden, but I think I'm agreeing with the first unpopular opinion.
Yeah, I feel two ways about it. Because on one hand, like you said, he's either really good or he's non-existent. So I feel like the year we got promoted, he got 10 championship goals. And to have someone who can score 10 championship goals on your bench isn't the worst thing at all. Having said that, I'm not mad that they're moving past the Hal Robson-Kanu era at West Brom because he was just so frustrating. And I think it's going to give, hopefully, a better chance for a younger player like perhaps Tulloch to get into a game. And I think we've seen it play out a bit with Zohore that I don't think he's going to be around the match day squad very often now because I don't think Big Val rates him. So I agree and I disagree, but I'm happy with where we are if that means that we're going to get some young players into the game.
Yeah, I think it became a bit tiring at the end, just having at the end of his Albion career, well, for now, he did score that nice goal against Liverpool and he did start putting in some performances. Maybe that was to win a contract or something. But I think my dad, if he's listening, will not like me saying that I'd like him back because I can hear him sigh every time he came on the pitch at the end of a game. So I'm sorry, Dad, about that. But I think I'm more open to giving youngsters a chance than Kanu, and I hope that Val does give youngsters a chance instead. But I think if worse comes to worse, injuries in the front line, it may have to be a return of Kanu. But I wouldn't be completely upset. I wouldn't be upset at all if he didn't come back if it means we play some youngsters.
Yeah. All right. So the next one, and this one has to do with kits. The yellow and green kit makes us look like Norwich. Your thoughts?
Well, I think, yeah, it definitely does. It means we can't play Norwich away properly, really. We have to bring out a third kit, which I think, during some times has been pretty appalling. I'm looking at the purple one is the one that I'm thinking of, as we talked about before we started, Baden, which I think sets most people's eyes on fire, I think. But I think it does make us look like Norwich. That's not to say it's a terrible kit. I like the history behind it. I just envisioned in my mind is Cyril Regis playing in it with his collar on it. Obviously reminds me of that. I think it was the 18-19 season that we had the one with the collar. Although I wasn't a massive fan of that particular kit, it did give me a lot of, well, I won't say nostalgia because I wasn't alive, but it does give me a nice sense of heritage and a nice sense of that's our kit for Albion. However, it is very similar to Norwich. We couldn't even go near Norwich's ground without having to change the kit. So, yeah, I think I do like it, but it does make us look like Norwich. Baden, what are you saying about that one?
Yeah, I mean, a color's a color. I mean, this is obviously, I'd have to agree with it. I like you love the yellow and green kit for the heritage of it. Like you said, seeing Regis, the likes of like the 3 Degrees as well, Regis and all, like that squad made that kit iconic for us. So I'm never against wearing it. But like you said, when you play a club like Norwich and they wear the same color, you're gonna have to, you know, wear a different color. And it's either gonna be the purple, which I despise, or the one that makes the purple look like a good kit, the yellow and red. So yeah.
Oh, ugh, that is correct. That is a gross
Well,
kit.
I
Yeah,
think that one's a simple one, really. I'd have to agree with that comment.
yeah, me too.
All right, so we'll go to our next unpopular opinion, and it has to do with a player who was with us last season, Matthias Pereira. And one fan says Pereira wasn't very good last season.
Ooh, that is. I think he definitely was inconsistent. I think I wouldn't say not good, because I think obviously he got the high. I think he's a top scorer, top assister probably as well. So I think definitely last season he was good. He was incredibly inconsistent. Obviously, if you cast your mind back to when Bilic was the manager, I don't even think he got more than 2 goals and maybe 2 assists. I think that was probably his tally. And then obviously under Big Sam, he really came to life. See, Big Sam, for all his flaws, does know how to get the best out of a player like him, who's probably the only real footballing player in that side who can really light up a pitch, like he did with probably somebody like JJ Okocha back in his Bolton days. But I think Matthias Pereira was very inconsistent. That's not to say he wasn't good, but he was very inconsistent. So I partially disagree with it, because he was terrible at times. However, he was also the best player by far in an Albion shirt on the pitch last year.
I'm gonna actually have to disagree with you there.
Oh,
But not on this per se, but I think Sam Johnston was the best player in a West Brom shirt last year.
yeah. Overall, Sam Johnston was the best player, but at times I think Pereira outshone him in the games that we were actually quite good in, and we didn't
Yeah.
need him as much.
I would have to. I think I'm gonna agree with you pretty much with this unpopular opinion. The one thing I will say is I feel like his season is a bit overrated amongst Albion fans, because yes, he did play well on the back end of the season, but I feel like pretty much it was only when Allardyce came in that he really started to play well, which is not. It was already a couple weeks into, like it was almost halfway into the season when he started to really turn it on, right? And
Yeah,
also, you know, when we look at the goals he scored, the reality is he scored also a fair few penalties. So to say he scored, I don't know the exact number, but say he scored 10 goals, and if like 3 or 4 of those goals are penalties, I think that takes a little bit of the edge off of that stat. So I'm not saying he didn't play well, and at times I think he played well against Wolves when we beat them, and I think, he was obviously a part of that 5-2 win against Chelsea. But I would have to agree that he wasn't the player we were hoping he would be throughout the full season last year.
yeah. I think I think a lot of Albion fans, probably including myself, cling to him from that season, because what else do we have to cling to apart from? So you mentioned the 2 victories there, which were probably my personal highlights, and he was involved in both of them quite heavily. But I think we cling to him, and we probably cling to Sam Johnston a lot. Maybe Pereira more than Johnston, because I think Johnston was player of the season, as you said. But I think Pereira, we sort of cling to him because we were like, he was, probably the only good goal scoring or assisting threat or creative threat that we had in that side. So yeah, I think his season was definitely overrated, but he was very good at times, but also very bad at times, very inconsistent.
And don't even get me started on his set pieces. Like, he scored the
Oh,
one free kick against Everton, and then for the rest of the season decided his set pieces weren't going to be any good.
tearing my hair out with the corners that just kept hitting the first man every time. We had to even get Conor Gallagher to take some, and he technically is not the best player, not as half the player that Pereira is in terms of technicality, but he's kept hitting the first man every time he took a corner. It's so frustrating, but yeah, very annoying.
Anyways, we'll move on to something to do with the transfer window that just passed and someone who we didn't end up signing, but Dwight Gale, who I believe right now is a free agent. And fans are saying if he came back this year, he would not have been as good as the 18-19 season.
Oh, wow. I think he's still at Newcastle, but I think he's like sat in the reserves, so he's definitely not getting anywhere near the pitch anytime soon. Unfortunately, I think if he came back, I'd be very happy because I like him, and that season was so entertaining from an attacking perspective for Albion. Absolute mess in defence, but going forward was probably one of the better seasons that I've seen as an Albion fan, and Gale was at the heart of it. I don't think that we've had a striker like that for quite a while. I think casting my mind back in terms of finishing ability, it's got to be the Odemwingie, Lukaku, who were on his heights. But yeah, he wouldn't be anywhere near as good as he's had injuries over the past few seasons, and obviously lack of game time. I think he's only played like 40 games since leaving Albion, and that's in 3 seasons, which I think is a little bit embarrassing. And obviously he'd probably be not very match fit and definitely not fit enough to play Big Val's style of football, but he wouldn't be as good. I agree with that unpopular opinion, but I do miss him, and I would take him back. I would take him back in a heartbeat, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that again. So far, we haven't disagreed. So that's when we'll get into the fun stuff. I think he won't be as good simply as well. He won't have players like Rodriguez. So I think he played so well together with Rodriguez, and the system's going to be different. Now, I think if he could get into the team, it's similar to Kanu. I think he's a better option than Zohore. So, of course, he'd be a good fit. But if he could get himself into the team and sort of get a little bit of a chemistry, I think if he got back to his best, he'd get ahead of Robinson realistically. So I think there's a chance he could reach a similar height, but I think a lot of things would have to go right, and it would be a long path to get there. So.
Yeah, I think it would take a lot of fitness for him, and for somebody I think did have a few injuries at Albion, obviously having loads at Newcastle, be really difficult for him. But yeah, he definitely displaced Robinson. He'd probably be our starting striker as well. But yeah, I just miss him. I think I'm just talking from 18-19 perspective, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, he scored how many goals? He scored a lot of goals that year. So
yeah, it's ridiculous.
You take that amount of goals any day.
Yeah.
All right. Now, the next fan, this one, I'm not sure. I already read it thinking, I don't know how old this person is, but I think they're a bit younger, perhaps, saying Dara O'Shea is the best centre back we've had.
Yeah, well, I think we've just had a little word about it before recording. I think I'll let you do the lecturing in a minute, Baden, but obviously, I'll talk about Dara O'Shea himself, and I'll let you go on to the defensive stalwarts that we've had over the years. But I think Dara O'Shea, he's made a massive improvement over the past 5 whatever it is games that we've started in the Championship. He looks at home in Val's system. He looks definitely, I think, the second best centre half, and first being Matt Clark so far. And I think he just looks at home. I think he looks really physical, and I like what he's doing. And obviously, had a bit of a spat with Ronaldo, if you guys saw that the other day against Portugal, which was always nice to see. But I think Dara O'Shea's a fantastic player, and I think he's done really well. But I will disagree with that unpopular opinion quite heavily, because he's definitely not the best. I think I don't know if this person means ever, or whether this person means this season. This season, he's definitely up there with Matt Clark.
Defender for us this season, but
yeah, I think ever is definitely too strong. But Baden, I'll pass over to you so you can take a bit of a listen to some better centre halves than him over our lifetime.
So first of all, I just want to say, if I were to guess, I think the person who said this is Irish. That's my first guess. But listen, I can only talk about the players in my lifetime that I remember. So right away off the top of my head, you've got to think of Gareth McCauley, who I think is probably the most consistent center back I've ever seen us have. And then you got the likes of Jonas Olsson as well, who was a rock right beside him for many years. But I think if we're not thinking about the amount of time they've played, and this is my lifetime, I think Johnny Evans is probably the best center back I've seen play for us. Just, he was so, you could see sort of the fact that he came from Manchester United, a little bit more class in his game than the other two that I just mentioned. Not that they weren't good players and did a really good job, but there was a little bit more composure in Johnny Evans' game. So I think those were two for me, or the three of those are the three in my lifetime that I think of when I think of great center backs for us. And I mean, I'm not saying O'Shea can't get to that point. At the end of the day, he's 22 years old. So, and to be able to be a starting center back in a championship team and look like he's going to be a good fit this season, hoping that he's not injured severely after that Ireland game.
Yeah.
Who knows what he could become? Perhaps he is someone we'll look back on as one of the best center backs we've had, but after one good start to a season, I don't think you can really say that.
Yeah, well, I think I may end up spouting my own unpopular opinion here, but I think Dara O'Shea is a future Albion captain in the making. I think he's young. He's obviously good, doing all right at organising the back line, because I've seen him be more vocal in the games. I think sat relatively close to where he was playing on the right hand side of a back three, and he looked like he was really shouting at people down the right hand side of the pitch and stuff. So I think he's a future Albion captain, but definitely not the best of all time I've seen in an Albion shirt. I think the three that you've mentioned there are probably the best that I've seen. I think obviously Big Dave, Darren Moore playing at centre back was probably literally just like a couple, just a little just probably a couple of years before my time. But I think Johnny Evans is pound for pound, and like definitely in terms of ball playing, he's the only player that I've seen for Albion who can successfully play out from the back without the ball ending up in the back of our own net. So I think Johnny Evans definitely is definitely the best. My favourite is probably Macaulay, just because I've got so many memories of him clattering people into the back of the net to score, like away at Chelsea, and him scoring against, the bigger teams. I just remember so many times he did that. I might even chuck Dawson in there. I know he wasn't there for very long, but I may just chuck his quality in, because he was a very good centre back and right back for us, and he did so much, especially in the Tony Pulis days. So I may even chuck him in there as well. But I think Dara O'Shea got a way to go, but I can see him definitely being in that list, in 10 years' time.
Yeah, I'd have to actually agree with you with Craig Dawson, because it shows. Look what he's doing at West Ham right now.
Yeah,
one of their best players.
Yeah, he's great.
So anyway, we'll move on, and we're gonna again talk about a player that used to play for us and has now moved on, Filip Krivinovic. And one fan says Filip Krivinovic would have been incredible if he had the right manager.
Well, I think he did. I say the right, when this person says the right manager, I disagree. I think the right manager for him was Bilic, because I think if it wasn't Bilic, he wouldn't have come back in the Premier League. I think if we wouldn't have seen him after that championship season if we didn't have Bilic as a manager. But I think a different manager would have probably played him a little bit better. However, I do think that Krivinovic, although I really liked him, and although he's a very jolly person and very happy person, I think he would have flourished under a different manager, definitely. But he was a bit lightweight for the Premier League. I think got bashed about a little bit, which was a shame, because he's a very technically good footballer. He didn't have much pace, so I think that probably went against him, and he was just a half a yard off a few of the passes that were played to him. I do like him, but he would have flourished under a different manager and probably would have gained more space. But under Allardyce, I don't think he had a prayer, to be honest. It was for somebody who's looking to play, really physical football. It was unfortunate that it just happened to fall to when Krivinovic was there. But he did well under Bilic, and obviously he was the right manager for him. They're both Croatian. They both do a really good job together. And obviously kept Mateus Pereira happy, which I think, as us Albion fans are finding out recently, is probably a more difficult task than it looks on paper. But I think, Krivinovic would have flourished under a different manager, but I think Bilic was the right manager for him.
Yeah, I agree with you. One thing I'd say that might be a bit of an unpopular opinion. I never really rated Kravinovic that highly. I mean, he was never as good as Pereira. He was never as good as Diangana, in my opinion. So I think it was the bringing him back was just to keep those players happy and sort of try and build that camaraderie in the group. But for me, I mean, he had some good games, don't get me wrong, but I always seem to think he's the kind of player who always just passed it to the side and passed it back. Like I never felt when he would be on the ball, like, oh my gosh, something's about to happen because he's about to make something happen. And I think that's one quality if you're playing in a midfield position that you kind of need something like that. Like Pereira had that like all in his, you know? I do think, like you said, playing for Bilic was the right fit for him because if it wasn't Bilic, he wouldn't be back at West Brom.
Yeah.
But I just, the reality is for him as well, I think one thing that you haven't spoke about that is a factor is I have a feeling he would fit more so in the position that Pereira was playing. And because he didn't get to play that because he was not as talented as Pereira, he struggled in a position that wasn't his position as well. So I think maybe even getting away from Pereira might have been something for him, even though he likes him and they're friends and all of that.
Yeah, I think Pereira knocked him out of that place. I think when he started getting the goal contribution, I think it was after that QPR game, I think they chucked him in the middle of that midfield where Kravinovic was. And I think that was actually probably the worst thing for Kravinovic, to be best friends with a player in the same position. I think it was quite unhelpful for him in the end. But you're right, he never played that killer pass. And unfortunately, that's not something you can teach a player. That's not something you can go to somebody and go, you need to play this ball. It's meant to be something that you're born with. It's something that's in your head. You can spot that ball in behind and you can play that ball perfectly. Pereira could do that. Unfortunately, Kravinovic more times than not ended up going to play that pass and then turning and play, as you said, playing it sideways or backwards, which is a shame because I wanted to see him do well. He's a nice guy and obviously worked very hard for the team and a very good guy to have around the club. It was just a shame that he was in the same team as Pereira, which I suppose is a weird thing to say because they're considering they were best friends. But yeah, I think it did him more harm than good, to be honest, to be in the same lineup as him.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. We'll move on and talk about one of our current players, Grady Diangana. And one fan says Grady Diangana is still a West Ham player at heart. He says he never wanted to move to Albion.
I think that is kind of true. I think if we cast our minds back all the way to that shock move, really, on a permanent deal after a really successful loan spell, none of us expected it to happen, but it happened because the owners wanted money and they wanted Diangana out the door for that money, and we paid them a handsome sum. So I think in some way he was kind of forced out of his home club. That's where he's grown up around London, and obviously West Ham probably supports them as well. Obviously, I don't know him at all, so he might support somebody completely different. But I assume he supports West Ham because that's where he's come through the academy at. However, I think obviously he came to the club willingly, signed a contract willingly. Obviously wanted to join back up with Bilic willingly. So he wasn't really tied up and sent away to West Brom and you've got to sign this contract. If he could have said no if he wanted to. However, I think with West Ham they wanted him out, and I think that probably hurt him a little bit. So I don't think he's quite as West Ham at heart as some may think. Although I think he is a little bit West Ham at heart because he probably always will be because he's grown up there. However, I think the way they kicked him out of the club or pushed him away, I think would probably hurt him a bit more. So if I was kicked out of West Bromwich Albion, I'd probably go, I don't really like West Brom as much anymore because they've done that to me, much as players would do that at any academy. So Diangana, I think, is probably half and half. I think there's a little bit of West Ham there because obviously there probably always will be, but I think it was a bit unfair the way he got booted out. But I think he'd probably be a little bit upset with what they did to him to love them more than Albion at the moment. But yeah, I don't think he's quite regained the form, but I hope he does very soon. But yeah, I think there is a little bit of West Ham still in there.
Yeah, I agree and I disagree because, of course, where you grow up and play is a place you're always going to be associated with, and you're always going to have a special place in your heart for that team. One thing I will say, I would sort of change the wording. I don't think it's a matter of he didn't want to sign for Albion. I think it's a matter of, at this point, he didn't know what he was signing up for, because he was expecting coming back, getting a chance to play in the Premier League, and of course he gets injured. You can't blame anyone for that, but and as soon as he becomes fit again, it's Allardyce, and he's not getting a sniff at a game opportunity, and all of a sudden he probably didn't play more than 45 minutes going down the stretch of the season. So I think it's not a matter of he never wanted to join. I just don't think he knew what he was going to sign up for here, because the reality is the expectation was they were going to come back to the Premier League, and now that we've got some young guys come in, we would have a chance to play the way we want to play and get some points. But the reality is that's not how it worked out, and things changed. And I don't think he had signed up for that. But I do hope that isn't gonna like have a permanent effect on the way he plays going forward, because I mean, we haven't seen the same Grady Diangana even starting this championship season as we saw heading down the back end of the last championship season. So hopefully he can find his form. It's another thing to keep in mind that he's starting a brand new system. Like, it's not like he's playing that in a front three like that ever for West Brom. So I think it's a matter of him just finding his feet again, and hopefully he can fall in love with what it was like to be at the club in that first championship season.
Yeah, you've got to be a bit wary as well, because he's had some injuries, as you said, and this play style is very injury suspect. So you're going to get injuries in this play style. He may be playing a little bit within himself, and I've seen that a little bit this season, where he's kind of turned a player inside out, and then all of a sudden he's slowed down a little bit and hasn't quite gone at full pace. Maybe he's playing a little bit within himself to try and prevent a little bit of injury. But as you said, I think none of us really expected that last season to go the way it did. I think all of us were a little bit sort of, looking at this shining West Brom team that went up in the end, and sort of thought, we'll stay up easily. Diangana, he'll fire in the Premier League. Pereira will fire in the Premier League. Bilic will be a great manager in the Premier League. All these players will be great. And in the end, they weren't quite that. So I think none of us really knew what we were getting into. And I think Diangana is really included in that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think we thought that we'd stay up. I think it was always going to be a challenge. I mean, you're a newly promoted team. Not a lot of these players. I don't think any of the players had a lot, other than Jake Livermore had a little bit of Premier League experience.
Yeah.
But other than that, I can't think of one player who's played a lot of Premier League football consistently. And it was always going to be a challenge. But I think the reality we thought it was going to be, we're either going to stay in the Premier League or we're going to go down fighting. And I don't think it really, for large periods of that season, I don't think there was a lot of, we're going to go down fighting. I think it was a lot of, we've lost 5-0 to Leeds. Like, that's the kind of game you got to be battling in. You might lose the game, but to lose 5-0 in a game like that, it shows problems in the club. Now, that was not what we expected from it, and I think that's part of the whole, he didn't know what he was getting into. But
it became a bit laughable in the end, I think, with the way that we were losing, because we'd given up, and I think so had most people, most fans as well. But yeah, Diangana, it's a shame. I hope he gets back to form.
Yeah. So we'll talk about the transfer window again. One person has said, and I am baffled by this, that this transfer window that we've just had was a good transfer window.
Good is not the word I'd use. Well, I would use it in a certain context. Good for nothing, like good for not spending £1 on a player or a transfer fee, if you like. I know we spent a bit on loan fees, wages and stuff like that, but not to spend to get 6 players, six players in the first team and not spend a penny. I think is pretty good. But I think so many fans, including myself, were expecting so much more. I went back the other day and on deadline day and looked at some of my previous videos on my channel, and I just thought, Louis, you're deluded. Look at who you were looking at us signing. You were thinking we're going to sign Yukushli. You thought we were going to sign Daryl DK as well. And I just looked at it and I thought that we were never going to buy those sorts of players with these owners and with this money available to us. It was never going to happen. But yeah, I don't think good is the word I'd use. I think it's reasonable for no money to have 6 players. Some of them are going to play in your starting 11. I think that's really good. However, I'd still get really annoyed that we spent absolutely nothing. And to read the article the other day by the Express and Star to say that we've set so much money aside for just random little things, like, you know, we've even factored in signing Jason Malumbi before he's even kicked a ball for us. We've put some money aside to buy him, and I think, why would you put money aside to buy him when you haven't even watched him kick the ball yet? But yeah, I would have loved to have seen us spend more. It's definitely not a good transfer window. I'd disagree with that unpopular opinion, but I think I'll agree with the fact that it was good for spending no money.
Yeah, I'd have to. If you don't mind, I'm gonna have a little rant here for a sec.
Go for it.
Our owners said we're gonna have a competitive budget. Okay. Now, I love the signing of Alex Mowat. For what we've paid for him and what he's done so far, I think he's a great signing. So I can see where you might say, yeah, it's been a good transfer window. However, there's so many needs this club has that were not addressed. I love Callum Robinson, but what happens if he gets hurt? We're not gonna get promoted with Zahor up front.
Oh.
We're not gonna, if we have to play many months with Zahor as our starting striker, we will not get promoted. And the central midfield, Livermore started well. What happens if Livermore starts to lag or he starts to lose his fitness? Who's next? Who's going to play in that position? Are you going to trust that Castro can do it? I'd like to see him get a chance, but that's a lot to ask him to do. Yeah. So to say you sold our best player, Matthias Pereira, and I know he said he wanted to get out, and I know you needed to do it, but then you get your 17 million and say, okay, we're going to have a competitive budget to do stuff, and then not do it. It's not good enough. And if the aspirations are to be in the Premier League, and to not only to be in the Premier League, because we might get up this year. In fact, I back us. I think we will get to the Premier League and play in the Premier League next year. But to get to the Premier League and stay there, you need a hell of a lot more. And to me, that's not good enough.
Yeah, I echo everything you said there, Baden. But with Pereira, I looked at this article by the Express and Star, who have pretty good know-how of inside the club and stuff like that. We decided to do the Pereira deal. We're getting paid 4.25 million over the space of 4 years, which is ridiculous. We're literally getting the price of a £4 million player each season. I don't get the point in that. And all this money is just, I don't quite think it's going in the owner's pockets yet, but I think as soon as he leaves, he'll take a big swag bag with him and just collect up all this money that he's setting aside for different things and go, right, that's mine. Thank you very much. I'll see you later if he ever sells the club. I echo what you say there, Baden. I completely agree with you. It's ridiculous. It's not good enough. I think to say you've got a competitive budget and then to sell the best player to Saudi Arabia, who are loaded with money, for 4.25 million installments over 4 years, that money's going to be gone each window, and you're just going to spend 4 million on a player each window, and you're just going to be like, well, we've actually gained nothing from that Pereira deal. We just bought 4 players over 4 years. But it's not good enough. I'm pretty unhappy with what the owners and the directors at the club are doing. I'm pretty upset with it, and I hope things change. But I know things won't change as long as the current crop of owners and the consortium are in charge. I think things need to change. I think, as you said, we'll go up. I think we'll go up. But the worrying thing is that Val's not going to be backed next transfer window in the summer.
Yeah,
and we'll end up in the same place that we were with Bilic and Allardyce, and we'll be, relegation zone by December, and then all of a sudden, Val, you're not doing good enough. Yeah, you're not keeping us. You're not doing what we've asked you to do. You're not keeping us up. When actually he could go, I've got no money to keep you up. I'm sorry. I've done what I can with this squad, but nobody can keep. Nobody, not even Guardiola could keep. The squad that Bilic took up. up in the Premier League without investment. So yeah, I agree with you, Baden. I'm pretty upset with the transfer window. I'm happy with what we got for no pounds or anything, but I think I'm pretty upset with that we spent no money at all.
Another thing to think about, the mindset's all wrong if you're thinking 4 million each window is going to be a good amount for a window, because the reality of the game we watch now is you're better off to spend 20 to 30 million on one player than to spend 5 million on 5 players. You're better off to go spend the money and invest and get the player that's going to be quality than to get 5 players who are championship players. Now, we've already got some players who I think could play in the Premier League for us. Like, I think looking at last year, the standouts, obviously Johnston, and then Bartley played well, and we spoke about Pereira, but Pereira's gone now. But you need to get those quality difference making players, and bringing in players who are 4 million pound players is not going to do it. And then to add on to your point there, talking about Malumbi, if we do sign him next year, they're going to end up saying, look, we've made a signing. And the reality is that's not really a signing. We had him on loan. He was a part of our team, and we brought him back. So they're going to take a little bit more credit than they need to, and we're going to go into the same issue. Anyway, I don't want to talk about this too much. I could rant about this all day, so we will move on. And this will be the last opinion for today. So the last unpopular opinion for today. Our current style of football with Big Val will not keep us in the Premier League.
This is a very strong disagree, unfortunately, for whoever has put this comment. I think that Val's football will keep us in the Premier League if we have a little bit. Obviously, we talked about the investment. We're not going back into that. But if we have some money and we bring in some quality players for Premier League level, Val's style of football is perfect for keeping you in the Premier League. My worry is that if he keeps you in the Premier League and you want to progress, you want to get further up the table, you want to end up challenging for European football, and if you're still in the Premier League in 5 or 6 years' time, his football is not quite pretty enough to do that. I think if obviously fans moaned about Pulis and he got us relatively high up the table. I moaned about Pulis because the football was pretty dire, even though it was getting results. I think Val's football may look a bit uneasy on the eye if you take it into the Premier League, but I think it's effective. I think we'll get results with it in the Premier League. I think we'll bully teams like Arsenal if they're still in the Premier League. I think we'll bully teams like them. I think we'll push them around, push teams like Chelsea around. And I think it would be really effective. However, it won't look pretty, but I do think it would keep us in the Premier League with the right investment.
Yeah, I might have to disagree with you on this one.
At least we got one disagree, Baden.
Yeah, we got one disagreement that we were hoping for. So, of course, the caveat is if we were to manage to sign some quality players who will fit into that system, maybe we can work that system in the Premier League. But we can't play the stat system in the Premier League with the squad we have now. So I sort of feel like I like it. I like the fact that if we lose the ball, we're going to try and work to get the ball back. And I think that would work in the Premier League, because how often do you see we're playing a team and we just sit back and let them have the ball? And in games like you said, these days, Arsenal, or if you're playing a club like Crystal Palace, or a club like, there's a whole list of them, Newcastle, Fulham if they're in the league, all those kind of clubs, that kind of system would work perfectly, because those are the points you need to be getting to stay in the Premier League. The reality of the league that the Premier League is now, the games against the big clubs like the Uniteds, the Cities, the Liverpools, anything you get from those games is bonus. And this is where I'm kind of disagreeing with you, because if you're playing a club like Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool, Chelsea, you can't play that system, because they have enough quality players that when the press comes, they'll be able to break the press. And the issue, and we've seen it a couple times even this season, particularly in the Bournemouth game, is if your press gets broken, they get in behind, and typically it's only your back three left. Now, I like O'Shea, I like Bartley, I like Ajayi, I like Clark, but it's a big ask for them to say, we're going to have quality players coming at you. You're going to be the only three back. You have to hold down the fort. Now, I'm not saying in some games I do think it would work, but even still, you still need that quality. I still think even teams like Palace, like I said, will have those kind of quality players who can make that pass to break your press. But I think the reality is you're going to have to play a little bit more defensive in the Premier League, because the quality between you and a big club is going to be different. And the quality between you and a club who's a distinguished Premier League team is also different. So unless you're going to be bringing in the players to make up that ground between you and the distinguished club, then you're going to have to play a more defensive style. And like you said, that's part of the worry, because we might go right back up and do the exact same as we did last year, and we're no further ahead.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you about teams like Man City. Just thinking about somebody like Man United who want to keep the ball. Chelsea would probably want to keep the ball. I think it can be done, the pressing. However, it has to be quite tactical, and I think it needs to be slightly better coached to different situations. So, for example, if City are just playing out from the back, if you press them, the ball's going to end up in the back of your net within 30 seconds because they'll just play through it. However, you need to work. I think we'd need to work it a bit more on traps and triggers that, maybe when a City player miscontrols it, which is very rare, but it may happen, then that's when you converge on the ball, and that's where they have no way out. But I think if it was coach, obviously now we're just seeing press. These teams aren't quite good enough to. Well, some are. Obviously, you said Bournemouth, they're good in the ball. I have no doubts that Fulham will be as well, and they can break through the press. And I think Man City could do that. But once they start to miscontrol, once they play heavy passes that can be intercepted, that's when you really converge on the ball. And I think if it's coached more like that in the Premier League, I think it would be much more effective. But there, as you said, there are sides like Palace. You've got players in their midfield who could unlock the door and get in behind. Teams like Brighton are quite good on the ball as well. So it can work, but it could also go very wrong. I agree with you on that. But I think if it was coached better, and I think if it was coached more effectively and coached more in coordination with the team we're playing. See, at the moment it's just press, just win the ball back, high up the pitch, whatever the opponent are doing, because they're not quite good enough to play out properly. However, if we're playing Man City, we can't just press all game because we'll end up losing 6-0. But I think it will be effective if you focus more on when they miscontrol or whether they make a mistimed pass or something like that. I think it would be much more effective. But yeah, I agree about just pressing all the time. It would not work.
Yeah, I'd have to say as well, when it comes to playing any team in the Premier League, I think the only way you could really do that pressing game is if you realize who's the weakest link within their midfield.
Yeah,
because I'd like to think that City's gonna have times where they miscontrol the ball, and those kind of clubs are, and any club's gonna. But the reality is, when you're that high a level, you can't bank on that. So I think finding the weakest, and that means that you've got to be on top of watching your scouting and seeing what players making what decision, and what players are maybe when they're getting the ball not making the greatest touches with the ball, and locking in on trying to find that player. Maybe that could work, but I don't think you can depend on realistically just the whole team at any point making a mistake. Now it's going to happen. We know it's going to happen, but to depend on that is it's a bit of a big move.
Yeah, and I think, well, I say mistakes, but like when teams, you've seen it, we do it so well, when they get themselves backed into corners, they've had a throw in their half and they go backwards, and they can't get out because we've pressed really effectively and we squeezed them in. I think that's more what I was getting at. But also the mistakes do come, especially I'm talking to like against somebody like Burnley, who obviously wouldn't try and play out from the back, but if they did, they wouldn't be very good at it. Therefore, we'd press them really effectively. But sides like Man United get, you know, quite upset when teams start to really challenge them physically. They can't handle it. Yeah. And I think we do really well against the side, you know, like, well, Arsenal are just a perfect example. You saw them against Brentford a couple of weeks ago, where they just got absolutely dominated by Brentford, who just wanted the game more, and they wanted to kick Arsenal players up in the air. Arsenal players came to play their tippy-tappy football, and they just couldn't do it because Brentford were all over them all through the game. If we did something like that, I think we'd be fine. But obviously, it's a much more difficult ask in the Premier League. And Val, having never managed in the Premier League, it's going to be a really uphill battle for him. And if he's not backed financially, I think it could go incredibly, incredibly wrong.
Yeah. The reality is, who knows what's going to happen? But one thing we do know for sure is that our club's kind of in a standstill until we get a new owner.
Yeah, we're just going to keep going up and down.
Anyway, we'll end on the unpopular opinions today, guys. Thank you so much for listening. This is new to me with the podcast, but I appreciate the audience. We'll do more of these if we get a whole bunch of different unpopular opinions. If you have any, shoot me a message on Instagram or commented on any kind of images, or tweet at the Baggies Podcast as well. He will take your unpopular opinions, and we can maybe do another one of these videos. But until then, thank you so much for listening, and have a good day, guys. Thank you.